Hello and welcome to today's video, which is part of a series on A-level study skills. And today what we're going to be looking at is how to write an analytical paragraph for A-level English literature. We're only going to look at how to write the first sentence of that paragraph because it's really important to get those sentences right. They're absolutely crucial to your essays. And then in subsequent videos, we'll have a look at how to finish off the paragraphs. So in our school, we call these first sentences point sentences. You might call them something else in a different school, perhaps overview statements or topic sentences, something like that, but it doesn't really matter. They all do the same thing. They introduce your main ideas and they show the flow of your argument in your essay. And what I've got here are some excellence criteria to help you to write your point sentence. So first of all, we need to link paragraphs together. We need to show the big picture, so the flow of your overall argument, and linking that out to the writer's ideas and their intentions and the concepts that they're trying to communicate. And using precise vocabulary as well is really useful. So to help us with this, I've got an example question about Othello based on the character of Desdemona. Don't worry if you haven't read Othello, hopefully this will still be accessible for you. So the question is, as Othello progresses, Desdemona transforms from a determined, unconventional character to a victim for whom we feel increasing amounts of pity. To what extent do you agree? Okay, if you have read Othello, you'll know that this is a pretty straightforward question to answer. But don't let that make you think that you don't need to concentrate when you're writing. So here's an example of a point sentence that you might have written as your first paragraph for this answer. So when we first encounter Desdemona, Shakespeare draws attention to her strength of character and confidence in speaking in front of a masculine court. Thus, he challenges the patriarchal concept of women's natural inferiority and lack of intelligence. Now, if you've read the play, you will know that the first time we see Desdemona, she has just eloped with someone that she shouldn't have got married to, and she's brought on stage in front of a court of men, of people in charge of the Republic of Venice, and she's asked to defend her marriage. And she speaks very confidently, very forthrightly about how she has a divided duty between her father and her husband, but she's going to choose her husband. So she's not worried about being unconventional or about standing up for herself in that first time that we see her. Now, what have I done well here when I'm writing my point sentence? Well, first of all, in terms of linking my paragraphs, I'm showing here when we first encounter Desdemona. That is a discourse marker, a way of showing the flow of my essay, that I'm working chronologically through the play. I'm indicating to my reader which point of the play we're looking at here. And then I'm responding directly to the question here. So Shakespeare draws attention to her strength of character. So I'm clearly directly linking that in with what the question has said. As well as that, I'm used the semicolon and thus to springboard me to look at the big picture, which is that Shakespeare challenges the patriarchal concept of women's natural inferiority. So I'm looking at Desdemona as an example of a much bigger idea, a much bigger concept about society that Shakespeare was exploring in the play. And in terms of using precise vocabulary, precise doesn't necessarily mean overly complicated. I think students often get hung up on having to use the most sophisticated, fancy-looking words, and actually what matters is that you use the correct word. So here, strength of character is what it articulates what I want to say about Desdemona. She is a strong character. There are fancier words that you can use, but this one will do. And especially in the time limit of an exam, for example, you don't want to spend your time getting hung up on using the world's most ambitious words. And then here, I've chosen challenge as a kind of key analytical verb here. If I'd said that Shakespeare explores the patriarchal concept of women's inferiority, that doesn't tell us what Shakespeare's opinion is of that. He might explore women's inferiority and say, yeah, actually, I agree with that. Or if I said Shakespeare reveals the patriarchal concept of women's natural inferiority, again, that wouldn't be articulating Shakespeare's opinion, it would just be saying this is what the patriarchy believes. So what I've done is I've quite precisely chosen the verb challenge, because as a reader, I'm interpreting the play and I'm thinking, actually, Shakespeare is challenging. He's saying, yes, this is what the patriarchy believes, and I don't agree with that. So I've been choosing my vocabulary really precisely. Right, let's have a go at writing the next point sentence. So imagine that after this I've got my evidence, I've got all my analysis and so on and my discussion, and then I'm going to start the next paragraph. Now the first thing we need to do is link our paragraphs together. So I'm moving chronologically through the play, so that's when we first encounter Desdemona, and I'm going to move to the next time when we see her, which is the start of Act 2, Scene 1. So at the outset of Act 2, Shakespeare continues to present Desdemona as unconventional. Okay, so what I've done here is at the outset of Act 2, that's my linking paragraph statement. I'm showing that I'm moving chronologically through the play, I've progressed from Act 1 and now I'm looking at Act 2. And then this verb here, Shakespeare continues to present Desdemona as unconventional. That's looking back at the previous paragraph and showing that flow of argument from one paragraph into the next. And then here's my precise vocabulary here. She's unconventional. Now, the thing that I haven't done is linking it into the big picture, the flow of the argument. In this first example, it's this clause after the semicolon, so he challenges the patriarchal concept of women's natural inferiority and lack of intelligence. So I need to have some kind of big picture idea continuing that, but I don't want to just repeat it, because just repeating the same big idea gets us nowhere. I mean, what's the point in writing more than one paragraph if we're just going to repeat the same concepts? So I need to take this somewhere and show development of my ideas as the play progresses. So Shakespeare continues to present Desdemona as unconventional in order to, and this phrase in order to is really helpful as a way of springboarding you from the specifics of the play to the big concepts that the writer's looking at. So at the outset of Act 2, Shakespeare continues to present Desdemona as unconventional in order to highlight not just a woman's intelligence, but also their adventurousness and courage. Okay, and the reason why I've gone for adventurousness and courage there is because at the start of Act 2 we see Desdemona has travelled from Venice to Cyprus into what she thinks is going to be a war, into a massive storm, and she's not balked at that, she's not turned away from that like a kind of damsel in distress would, but she has quite bravely faced this situation and gone on this journey into the middle of the war. So if you look at this phrase here, so I've got my in order to as the springboard to my big idea. I've chosen the analytical verb highlight because what I want to say here is that Shakespeare's drawing attention to this idea. He's emphasising this idea. And this not just woman's intelligence, so that's looking back up at my first paragraph, but this idea of adventurousness and courage is taking me forward to the next idea that I'm going to explore. So then I would have my quotation and my analysis as usual. So let's have another go doing another paragraph, another point sentence. So if we look back at the question, I've kind of dealt with how she's determined and unconventional, but I haven't talked about her much as a victim yet, and I want to address all the parts of the question. So my next point sentence is going to be based on that. So, however, by the middle of Act 3, Desdemona is increasingly presented as as weak in her marriage and confused by Othello's anger. Okay, now I'm writing this live because I want to give you the impression of you writing it yourself at home. And as I'm writing it, I've realised that weak in her marriage is probably not quite the right word. I'm going to change that to submissive. So that's my precision of vocabulary. I'm editing as I go along and making sure that I'm choosing the right words. So if we have a look at our excellence criteria, in terms of linking the paragraphs, I've got however, so I'm using that to signal that I'm looking at the other side of the argument, and you will have used the word however right the way from year 7 to do that. And by the middle of Act 3, signals that I'm moved from Act 1 into Act 2, and I'm now looking at Act 3 of the play. So I'm linking my paragraphs together. In terms of my precise vocabulary, I've got the word submissive. So I've done that first one and that second one. So now, the third one. So now what I need to do is link it out into the big picture. So having demonstrated, I'm going to make this a bit shorter so I can fit it all on one page. Having demonstrated Desdemona's bravery in Act 2, Shakespeare now suggests that perhaps this is not sufficient to promote women's freedom in a misogynistic society. Okay, as I said, I'm writing it live, so it's getting a little bit messy, but this is similar to what you'd be doing in an exam, for example. So what I've done here is, having demonstrated Desdemona's bravery in Act 2, so I'm looking back to my previous paragraphs and showing the flow, the progression of my argument across my essay. And then here, Shakespeare now suggests, so I'm taking those ideas from my previous paragraphs, but I'm building on them. I'm not just repeating them, but I'm showing how they can change, how they can develop, how they can progress. So Shakespeare now suggests that perhaps this is not sufficient to promote women's freedom in a misogynistic society. So I'm using Desdemona as an example of a female character in a patriarchal world, and then linking that out to the big questions about society that Shakespeare is asking in this play. You know, can women become independent? Can women be unconventional and survive in a patriarchal society? Or will they eventually be forced to conform to what the men perceive as their kind of right role in society? So, I know it's gotten a bit messy there, but just to go back to our excellence criteria here, make sure that in your point sentences, your overview statements, you're linking paragraphs together, that you're looking at the big picture and ensuring that your argument flows and develops across your paragraphs, and that you're using precise vocabulary. Okay, thank you very much for listening, and the next video in this little series is going to be about embedding evidence in your paragraphs.